The Woman at the Well, a bedtime story. Settle in, breathe deeply, and let yourself relax as we journey to an ancient well on a quiet afternoon. The sun hung high in the vast, cloudless sky over Samaria, pouring its golden warmth across the dusty landscape. It was the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and dance above the rocky ground, the kind that sent sensible people indoors to rest in cool shadows until evening came. The hour was noon, that still, silent time when the world seemed to pause and hold its breath. In the distance, past fields of barley that swayed ever so gently in the occasional breeze, stood the ancient well of Jacob. It was a place of history, a place of memory. Generations upon generations had come to this well, their footsteps wearing smooth the stones around its rim. The well was deep, so very deep, carved into the earth long ago by the patriarch Jacob himself for his children and his flocks. Around the well, a few gnarled olive trees provided patches of blessed shade. Their silvery green leaves rustled softly, whispering secrets to one another in a language only they understood. The sound was like a gentle lullaby, a peaceful murmur that seemed to say, "Rest, be still, all is well." Jesus had been walking for hours. He and his disciples had been traveling from Judea, heading north toward Galilee, and the journey had taken them through Samaria, a route many Jewish travelers avoided, but not Jesus. Never Jesus. His sandaled feet had covered mile after dusty mile, and now, as the midday heat pressed down upon the earth, he was tired. Genuinely, humanly tired. His disciples had gone into the nearby town to buy food, their voices and footsteps fading into the distance until only silence remained. And so Jesus sat down beside the well, his back resting against the ancient stones, cool despite the sun's intensity. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weariness in his legs, the dryness in his throat. The well was deep, and he had no rope, no bucket. He would have to wait. The minutes passed slowly, peacefully. A lizard skittered across a nearby rock, paused, tilted its head, then disappeared into a crevice. A dove cooed somewhere in the olive branches above, its voice soft and drowsy. The heat seemed to wrap around everything like a warm blanket, encouraging rest, inviting stillness. Then, in the distance, came the soft padding of footsteps. She walked slowly, this woman from the town. In her hands, she carried a large clay water jar, smooth and cool to the touch, balanced carefully against her hip. The jar was empty now, but soon it would be filled with the fresh, cold water from Jacob's well, water that would last her household through the evening and into the next morning. She walked alone. This was not by accident. Most women came to draw water in the early morning or in the evening, when the air was cool and the well became a place of gathering, of conversation and laughter. But she came at noon, when the sun was at its highest and the streets were empty. She came when she wouldn't have to face the stares, the whispers, the way other women pulled their children a little closer when she passed. Her life had been complicated. Painful. She had known 5 husbands, 5 men who had, for one reason or another, sent her away or left her. And now she lived with a man who was not her husband, because what choice did she have? In her world, a woman alone could not survive. The judgment of her community was a weight she carried every day, as heavy as the water jar, but far more difficult to bear. As she approached the well, she noticed the figure sitting there in the shade. A man. A Jewish man, by the look of his clothes. Her steps slowed. Perhaps she should turn back, come later. But no, she had walked all this way, and she needed water. She would simply keep her head down, fill her jar quickly, and leave. She came to the well's edge, set down her jar, and began to lower the rope and bucket into the deep darkness below. The rope was rough against her palms, familiar. She had done this countless times. Down, down, down the bucket went, until finally, splash, the sound of water, cool and welcoming, far below. Then the man spoke. "Would you give me a drink?" His voice was kind. Gentle. It held no judgment, no disdain. Just a simple request, spoken quietly in the heat of the day. She froze, her hands still on the rope. Slowly, she turned to look at him. His eyes met hers, and there was something in them, something she couldn't quite name. Warmth, perhaps. Understanding. "You're a Jew," she said, her voice cautious, uncertain. "And I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" It was a fair question. Jews and Samaritans didn't associate with one another. Centuries of history, of religious differences and mutual distrust, stood between them like a wall. And beyond that, he was a man and she was a woman, meeting alone at a well. That too was not done. Jesus smiled, just a little. The kind of smile that puts a worried heart at ease. "If you only knew what God has to offer," he said softly, "and who it is that is asking you for water, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Living water. The words hung in the air like a promise. She pulled the bucket up from the well, water sloshing inside, cool droplets splashing onto the sun-warmed stones. She set the bucket down and studied him more closely. "Sir," she said, gesturing to the well, "you don't even have a bucket, and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well?" The afternoon breeze picked up just then, stirring the olive branches above them, sending a cascade of dappled shadows dancing across the ground. The sound of the leaves was like gentle rain, soothing and constant. Jesus looked at the well, then back at her. "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again," he said. "But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Never thirsty again." She thought about that. Thought about the daily walk to the well, the weight of the jar, the sun beating down, the loneliness of coming here when no one else would. To never be thirsty again, what would that be like? "Sir," she said, and there was something almost hopeful in her voice now, "give me this water so I won't have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus paused, letting the moment settle. A bird sang somewhere nearby, 3 clear notes that seemed to echo in the stillness. Then he said, "Go and get your husband, and come back here." Her heart sank. There it was. The inevitable moment when her past would rise up and stand between her and whatever this moment had promised to be. "I don't have a husband," she said quietly, looking down at the ground. "That's true," Jesus said, and his voice held no condemnation, only acknowledgement. "You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't your husband. You've spoken the truth." She looked up sharply, her eyes wide. How could he know? They had never met before. She had never seen him in her town. Yet somehow, he knew her story, knew her pain, knew the secrets she carried. But here was the remarkable thing, knowing all of this, his expression hadn't changed. There was no disgust in his eyes, no self-righteous judgment. Only that same gentle warmth, that same invitation to keep talking, to keep being honest. "Sir," she said slowly, her mind working, "you must be a prophet." She paused, then decided to ask him about something that had troubled her for years, the great debate between her people and his. "So tell me, why do you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it's here at Mount Gerizim, where our ancestors worshipped?" The sun shifted slightly in the sky, and a small cloud, the first of the day, drifted across its face, offering a moment of deeper shade, a moment of relief. The temperature dropped ever so slightly, and it felt like a gift. Jesus leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "Believe me," he said, "the time is coming when it won't matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. What matters is that you worship him in spirit and in truth. God is spirit, and those who worship him must do so from a genuine spirit and with truth." She absorbed this, feeling something shift inside her. Not a place, but a spirit. Not a building, but truth. It was a different way of thinking about God, more personal, more intimate. I know the Messiah is coming, she said, almost to herself. The one they call Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. The breeze picked up again, warmer now, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and distant herbs. The olive leaves rustled more insistently, and somewhere far off, a shepherd called to his flock. Jesus looked directly into her eyes. I am the Messiah, he said simply. The words settled over her like the softest blanket, like cool water on parched ground. I am the Messiah. She stared at him, and in that moment, everything shifted. The shame she had carried, the loneliness, the sense that she was too far gone, too broken for God to care about, all of it began to crack and fall away like clay from a jar. She had come to draw water, expecting nothing more than to fill her jar and return home unseen. Instead, she had met someone who saw her, truly saw her, and didn't turn away. Someone who knew her completely and still spoke to her with kindness. Still offered her something better. Living water. A spring welling up inside her, never running dry. In the distance, voices approached. The disciples were returning from town, their arms full of food, their voices carrying across the fields. She could hear their footsteps now, growing closer. The woman looked at Jesus one more time, memorizing his face, the kindness in his eyes. Then she did something she hadn't planned to do. She left her water jar, that heavy jar she had carried all the way here, and ran back toward the town. Her feet flew across the dusty path, her heart pounding not with fear now, but with excitement. Something incredible had just happened. Something she needed to share. The town square was quiet in the midday heat, but she didn't care. She ran through the streets, calling out, knocking on doors. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? People emerged from their homes, curious, skeptical. This woman, the one they usually avoided, was suddenly animated, alive in a way they'd never seen before. There was something different about her, something in her eyes. Come, she said again, breathless. Come and see. And slowly, one by one, they followed her. Out of the town, across the fields, toward the well where Jesus still sat. Meanwhile, at the well, the disciples had returned and were urging Jesus to eat. But he seemed distracted, his gaze directed toward the town, toward the approaching crowd. I have food you don't know about, he told them. They looked at each other, confused. Had someone brought him food? My nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me, Jesus explained, and from finishing his work. Look around you. The fields are already ripe for harvest. And indeed, across the golden fields, a stream of people was coming, Samaritans, people his disciples would never have expected him to engage with, all walking toward them because one woman had met Jesus at a well and everything had changed. The Samaritans reached the well, crowding around, eager to hear for themselves. Jesus sat among them, teaching, answering questions, sharing the same good news he had shared with the woman. The afternoon stretched on, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the horizon. The light turned softer, more golden. The heat began to ease. The shadows grew longer, painting the landscape in shades of amber and bronze. The people listened, captivated. And when evening came, they urged Jesus to stay longer. Don't go yet. Stay with us. And he did. He stayed in their town for 2 days, teaching, healing, simply being present with people who had been told their whole lives that they were outsiders. The woman, the one who had come to the well alone, now found herself surrounded by her neighbors in a completely new way. They weren't whispering about her anymore. They were thanking her. We believe now not just because of what you told us, they said, but because we've heard him ourselves. And we know that he truly is the Savior of the world. As night fell over Samaria, the air cooled completely. Stars began to appear, one by one, then in multitudes, filling the sky with light. The olive trees rustled peacefully in the evening breeze, and from the well of Jacob, laughter and conversation drifted into the night. The woman sat outside her home, a cup of cool water in her hands, water from the well, yes, but somehow it tasted different now. Sweeter. More refreshing. She thought about what Jesus had said, living water, welling up inside, never running dry. She understood now. He hadn't been talking only about physical water. He was talking about something deeper, a kind of life that flowed from the inside out, a kind of acceptance and love that didn't depend on her past or her mistakes. It was about being fully known and fully loved at the same time. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The night air smelled of jasmine and earth. Somewhere, a night bird called. The stars wheeled slowly overhead in their ancient dance. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, she felt at peace. Not because her circumstances had changed, but because she had met someone who changed how she saw everything. Someone who saw her not as the town outcast, but as a person worthy of conversation, worthy of truth, worthy of living water. She thought about the well, sitting there in the darkness, its waters deep and cool. Tomorrow, women would come in the morning to draw water, and perhaps, just perhaps, she would join them. Perhaps things could be different now. The breeze moved through the town, gentle and constant, like a whisper of grace. And in that moment, surrounded by starlight and the soft sounds of evening, she understood what it meant to never thirst again. It wasn't about never needing physical water. It was about having something inside that sustained her no matter what, a spring of hope, of love, of forgiveness that bubbled up fresh every morning. She smiled to herself in the darkness. Tomorrow would come, with its challenges and its joys. But tonight, she rested. Tonight, she let herself simply be held by the peace of knowing she was seen, known, and loved. The well of Jacob stood silent under the stars, its ancient stones holding the memory of an afternoon when everything changed. When living water was offered to a thirsty soul, and a woman discovered that no one is ever too far from grace. And all around, the world breathed softly, peacefully, as night deepened and the land rested. Rest now. Like the woman at the well, you are seen. You are known. You are loved. Let yourself rest in that peace. All is well. All is well. Breathe deeply. Let go. Sleep.